Hello and welcome to the Milford Finance Committee, January 9th, 2019. The only item on the agenda today is an update from the schools. One of the requests at the end of the last budget process was that we have more frequent communication with the whole committee and the schools as the budget process starts and starts to evolve. Obviously, the subcommittee has been working aggressively with the schools, and the schools have obviously been working with themselves about getting their budget together. But one of the requests, like I said, was to have them come in on a more frequent basis so that they're not just becoming before the full committee, April 15th, right before the Maytown meeting. So that was the reason why I wanted to have the schools come in and basically just kind of give us an update where they are in the budget process, so that we don't have any surprises and that kind of stuff. And obviously, I'm looking for the subcommittee members. I know the chairman, Mr. Schiavi, is not here tonight, but other subcommittee members, please feel free to chime in as much as possible, because I know you guys had a meeting, in fact, just on Monday as well, your latest meeting, to help point us in the right direction of things maybe you think we need to talk about with the schools, because obviously you have a much better grasp on it than the rest of us. So with that being said, who's talking tonight? I don't see Miss Perry. The big boss talking?
I'm going to jump up. I'm going to be playing the role of Kathy Perry tonight.
All right.
All right, so
Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Kevin McIntyre.
you want to send these around? Sure. So I want to kind of address the committee on 4 items tonight. First, I want to give you a budget update on the 1920, kind of where we are in the process. Secondly, I want to give you some information on our year-to-date budget for FY 2018-19. And then I have a document included in the packet I've sent around that explains per-pupil expenditure, because that's a question that comes up frequently. One of the questions that Mike Schiavi wanted me to share with the full committee. And finally, I want to give you some school choice information as well. Is always another request. So in terms of the 1920 budget, we're right on schedule. We have we start the process in late October, early November, and we've received presentations from all department heads and principals. We had our annual meeting this past Saturday with the full school committee and kind of vetted through the budget. Right now, we're going to present our initial numbers to the subcommittee. I think our next meeting is on the 15th of January.
15th.
So on the 15th of January, we'll have kind of vetted numbers through Kathy's office. We want to make sure we're providing accurate information. In terms of the year-to-date budget for the FY 2018-19 budget, if you go into your packets, and it's this document right here. And we shared this with the subcommittee on Monday as well. The only area of concern that we have right now is out of district. Everything else seems to be spending, right along where our expectations are. But the only area of concern we're really watching is the out of district, costs. And that's a similar issue we have with the upcoming budget, because those costs are rising in Milford. They're also rising across the Commonwealth. We're seeing that trend across the state.
Can you just explain to everyone what out-of-district costs are, just for anyone, we have some new membership, or anybody else in the public?
Sure. Out-of-district spending is anytime a student with special needs is, through the IEP process, is placed in either a collaborative program or a private school that focuses on a particular area of special education. Can we pull a little closer?
Yeah.
All right. So, and those costs can run anywhere from $45,000 to $50,000 on the low end per year to in excess of $200,000 to $250,000 per year for some students who require some very specific specialized programming.
Where's the out-of-district number on this sheet?
It's on the second page. If you look at,
The two last lines.
it's the last 2 lines.
Because it says tuition non.
Tuition non-public schools and tuition collaboratives.
That's considered the combination of the two, the 2.1 million is the out-of-district expense being.
Correct.
But that's not school choice, that's.
I know what school choice is. But I've never seen it called non-public school versus collaborative.
Yeah, so the difference there is a collaborative, we belong to what's called the Bi-County Collaborative. We're a member, along with, I think it's either 13 or 14 other districts. And by becoming a member, I serve on the board of the Bi-County Collaborative. And we receive discounted tuition, we have access to professional development services, In almost every district, I don't want to say every district, but I would say 70 to 80% of the districts in the state are connected to some collaborative. Some districts are connected to multiple collaboratives. That doesn't mean that we only send students to that particular collaborative. We do have other students in, like, there's an collaborative in Assabet, there's a collaborative in Worcester. We do send some students there based on the programming that they provide. And other districts who aren't connected to our collaborative in Bi-County will send students to the Bi-County collaborative as well.
Kevin, you gonna go through why they're up? Is it number of students? Is it cost of programs?
It's actually both. I'd say we're seeing an uptick in the number of students. We're kind of still below the state average in terms of the number and percent of students we send to out-of-district placements, but we're seeing an uptick. We also have seen an uptick in just kind of more expensive individual placements. Not only have we seen a rise in, some residential placements that we've had, whether it's due to, someone being medically fragile or a student with autism, for example. And some of those placements, like I said, can be in excess of $200,000 per year. There's also additional transportation costs that can be very expensive as well. We transport these students to the placements.
Question, on the basic math here, the budget is 1.2 for the non-public. We spent 607, and you got encumbered 770. The encumbrance looks incorrect because it's actually throwing you in a tailspin. But the encumbrance is greater than 50%. How can?
You know what, I can't, that'd be a great question for Kathy to answer, and unfortunately she's not.
Same way with the next line,
Yeah.
same kind of problem. So I'm not sure.
And that may be why there's a deficit right now.
That's exactly why,
Right,
when you
right.
talk about the costs that were higher than what you expected, that's the exact reason why they're a negative. Because they're higher than what you budgeted for.
I'm looking at this is 6 months into the budget cycle.
Correct.
And, fundamental basic math, six months, we're 50% down the path. So why would you be looking at least a 10 or 20% increase in the last half of the expense structure? You shouldn't.
No, because we get students who move into the district that are unexpected. That's the biggest driver. Someone's placed during the year.
So is this going to put the budget out of line at the year end?
I don't anticipate that, but it's something we're watching closely. We're generally, historically, able to manage that line, and it does tend to fluctuate. It can fluctuate very dramatically throughout the year.
Because when I look at the 607, you're slightly high there, because that's going to be 1.214.
Yep.
Okay, so you would be inconsistent with the budget projection there. But then you go encumber somebody, I don't know how these encumbrances are ever determined, 770,000, and that's way out.
Correct. That's why there's a deficit of 174 for the year.
So can you give us an answer about that? Maybe we want to adjust that encumbrance so we don't, I don't want to get to May and start looking to find another $100,000 to $150,000.
I don't anticipate that happening, and that hasn't happened historically.
Can you make a note of that, Chris? So
Yep,
we can
certainly.
follow up on that?
But as Kevin said, in the past, they've just transferred between departments, and that kind of says to cover that.
Well, that's the problem. Everybody starts transferring at their own will, and we don't ever get to follow these numbers as we should be.
No,
following.
absolutely. But the thing is, and to his point, you can't forecast people moving into our town that have issues. And that's why they budgeted what they budgeted, the 2.1 million, and now it looks like they're gonna be short 300,000 because of maybe even one child moving into our district,
Could be $250,000.
or two children moving into the district that
Let's
cause
deal with the facts as we get there, okay? Even if it's on a monthly basis.
Those are the facts right there. It's 300,000 in the
I don't
negative.
know how you encumbered.
He just gets moved into town, Jeff.
Dr. McTighe, could you say why we send the kids out? I mean, is this, we're not equipped in town to handle it, or, just for, I know the reason, but I mean, just so, a lot of people may not, people may not know.
It could be a variety of reasons. And I spoke to the subcommittee on Monday, kind of gave them a quick kind of primer in the IEP process. So each year, any student with special needs, we convene what's called an annual team. And at that annual team meeting, the teachers and the school presents kind of the progress that a particular student is making, how they're making in terms of their goals, what kind of progress they're making in terms of their goals, and the determination is made on placement as well. We talk about placement. And I would say the vast majority, and again, I don't have the percentages in front of me, but the vast majority of students with special needs receive their services within the general education classroom, which we call inclusion. And those students might receive support from a special education teacher in, one or more one or more classes during the day or one or more periods during the day. The next level up is the students will receive small group support, which means that they're receiving their instruction in a small group setting. The next level up from that we provide in-house is called a sub-separate program. And a sub-separate program is the student spends either a portion or a majority of their day in a program that's separate from the general education program because they have a particular need. Some students that we have, either we don't have the capacity to provide the services, or it really comes down to that. We don't have the capacity to provide the services is really what it comes down to. And at that point, if we make a placement recommendation, the parent can either accept our recommendation or there's an appeal process. And the appeal process leads to like mediation. There's a thing called the Board of Special Education Appeals where parents can, if they're unhappy with a placement, can kind of go down kind of a litigation route. So basically, the majority of our students, just to summarize, are in inclusion. A smaller percentage receive, some services in small group. An even smaller percentage receive services in what's called sub-separate programs within our public schools. And a significantly smaller percentage are placed into either collaborative programs or private schools that service students with special needs. And a recent example that I cited with the subcommittee on Monday is we had a program for students that were medically fragile. And these students had a variety of needs and pretty significant needs, which required nursing services, a number of therapies, and generally kind of a ratio beyond 1-to-1. We did an analysis, and we do an analysis of all our programs each year, and we determined last year that it just wasn't cost effective to provide the services in the Milford Public Schools because the requirements were so great. And again, I'm oversimplifying this because there's all kinds of requirements in terms of age. In a sub-separate program or any program, we can't have more than a 48-month age parameter. So sometimes if we have to split programs, they become cost prohibitive to provide in-house. It's a question.
Is the state providing any additional assistance on special
Yeah,
needs
so we receive
programs?
what's called circuit breaker for any student, and I don't have the formula in front of me, but it's basically any student that has like an extraordinary cost. And it's, I think, something like 3.5 times the kind of foundation budget, and there's kind of a formula attached to that. So we do receive circuit breaker reimbursement, and some of those costs are, can be offset by the circuit breaker funds. But that formula, like the state budget, fluctuates from year to year.
That was really my question, whether is it increasing any, staying the same, or is it dropping off year to year?
I think last year, and again, Kathy would have this answer right at her fingertips, but I think last year it went up a couple percentage points, but it's been relatively stable. So we're really, even for our extraordinary, like the students that have an extraordinary cost attached to them, we're not getting kind of that full reimbursement. It's something like 67% of what the law intended. It's been like that forever, since we've had circuit breaker in place.
And that would be the only thing that we ask for, that obviously if you're spending 2.2 million out, but you can fix this problem for $1 million, that we
And
do
that's-
that, and I know that you do that,
Yeah.
but that's what,
Yeah.
just do your due diligence, and if you know that it's cost effective to keep them, and if it costs us $1 million to save 2.2, then obviously that's the kind of math that we like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're always looking at those programs. And we do receive, Medicare reimbursement for a number of, students that we provide therapies for, and that money actually goes directly to the town. And that number is about 500,000. But again, it's all kind of in the mix.
Anybody else have a question out of district?
Was that the question? Yeah, okay.
Just one more. So all things being equal, if the budget stayed exactly the same, you're gonna be a 1.8 surplus
If the budget.
For the whole department.
for the whole department, for the whole thing, including, whether if that's accurate for the outplacement, right? The encumbrance is anticipated in the next 6 months, right?
Let me get back to you on that answer, because I'm not necessarily sure about that one. That's a great question.
Very good, Jeff.
Yeah, it's a great question. All right. Any other questions on the 18-19 budget that I can answer? Or attempt to answer?
I think we're good.
I'm curious, a couple.
Yep, absolutely, go ahead, Jay.
We're showing employee benefits, it's not a lot of money, but it's combined, the two combined are 15 grand budget. Look, all the employee benefits for the schools are, all those expenses are incurred by the town. So I don't know why we would have any budget there at all. We just-
Terry, I don't know that that's absolutely accurate, because things like tuition reimbursement, I didn't
All
think,
comes to the town. You can verify that was that.
That's
I've
in the-
been-
that's
I've
in the
been
general
down-
fund?
I've been down this rodeo before, and that's always been one of my bugaboos, is we don't allocate employee expenses, employee benefits to the school system and properly account for it.
So that's just, I think you're just talking about health benefits.
This one says there's 10 grand,
Which line are you on?
1420. Human resources benefit 1420, 10 grand, and then I go down here, I see another employee benefits,
5,200.
Which line is
5,000.
that?
5,200 for 5,000. And I'm just asking a simple question, what employee benefits do you incur in the schools that are not paid for by the town? This looks like a miscellaneous account to me, and
Yep, we
like
can,
all other accountants in the world, we hate miscellaneous,
Yep.
sundry items that
so
we
we'll
don't
get,
know about or where they're coming from.
I know he doesn't know
the.
the answer to that, so we'll get
Yeah,
that
so
from
I
Kathy
can-
though,
I
but
can- I can find that out for you.
get that from Kathy and I'll follow up on it, I wrote a note. So
I've got-
1420
I've
and
written
and
I mean, I'm
5,200.
not- Let's get rid of this stuff that doesn't belong here. Move on.
Well, I'm sure, yeah. We'll figure it out.
And these are all lines that are provided by the state too. This isn't something.
Okay,
unique to the
and if that's what it is, that's fine. If the state's saying, you've got to hold this line in reserve to stay consistent with the other 351 districts or towns, that's a good explanation. But I don't think we need to budget anything, just put a zero in it.
And it doesn't even look like they spent any of it,
So again,
or intend to spend
again,
any.
I'm not sure what that line refers to, but we can find out.
And it doesn't even look like it's the 10,000 is at the end, so it doesn't even look like it's being spent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before I move on? All right. Let's shift to two things on school. Actually, let's do this one, it's gonna be quicker. A question comes up all the time is what is a per pupil expenditure and what funds does it tie to? And the funds account kind of line up to the functional categories in the budget right here that I just provided you. But this document right here that I'm holding up, this one not working. Okay, I'll move it over. I just wanted to provide this as a point of information for the committee, because the question does come up, is it an apples-to-apples comparison when we're looking at Milford versus Cambridge versus Mendon Upton, or, pick the district. And this is just more for your information. I just wanted to provide it to the committee. It's a quick read, it's not very exciting, but I think it's good information to have.
Take it, Kevin, it is an apple-to-apple comparison.
It is, it is, it is.
Well, one of the requests from Mike, sort of demographic, the similar communities and what would you see per pupil and ways to say-
Yeah, so that's, we can pull that information, but not within just a couple days, because I think we have to do kind of, and we got it, I think, late last week, and, but that's something I can definitely get for you, because we have access to, there's a couple different analyses we can do. There's a thing called the DART data, which you can get right from the Department of Education website, that kind of compares similar towns. And we also can pull kind of spreadsheets from just the state that talk about per pupil.
Yeah, but you have to be careful when you start doing comparisons, because when you start doing statewide comparison, you're comparing Boston, the demographics and the expenses of running a Boston district versus 495 and where we are. And there's a huge disparity between the two, huge numbers. And I started doing my own, and I thought I had a printout of it, of doing a comparison of the contiguous towns in our region and what we pay teachers and all those kind of things. And we're right within the margin of error. That I have no problem with what I've seen thus far. I know Kathy had presented that we were like $2,000 per student behind everybody in the Commonwealth. And that's not really a factual statement.
It actually is a factual statement. It's about 1,900, actually.
But that's taking into consideration Boston, who spends close to $30,000 per student, and migrating them all together and average them out. That's not a fair comparison. What I want to know is what are we spending versus Bellingham, Franklin, Holliston, Hopkinton, and what are we getting for results?
So I would say that that's also not a fair comparison, because demographically, our students on average are much more expensive to educate than the students in the surrounding communities.
And that should come out in the comparison. We should be able to get those demographics and put those on metrics and look at them correctly across the whole matrix. 'Cause I actually did, I don't know where I lost it, I separated it, but I actually did a comparison all the way out, comparing all those towns that I mentioned. I even reached out a little further than usual. And when I look at the amount we're paying teachers, the amount we're spending, it's all within the bell curve. If I put them all on a bell curve, they would all be in the same. There's a couple outliers, okay? Granted, I think it was one of them. It was either Holliston or Hopkinton. It was like 19,000. The number was way up really high versus Bellingham.
Jerry, it's almost the same conversation we had with the personnel board when they do theirs, you know what I'm saying?
It's exactly what I
Yeah.
was thinking.
Yeah.
Because we always, it's unfair for the personnel board to come in and say they're paying town administrators in Framingham, Natick, and Wellesley $20,000 a year more than we are. Well, my argument is, well, let's go to Grafton, Blackstone, and Bellingham and use that as a comparison. Well, they don't want to do that, okay? But, so the corridor that we're dealing with is the 495 corridor. I would venture a guess that our students look a whole lot the same as they do in Hudson, Marlboro, all up and down that corridor. Now, the only place that there would be a deviation that would be experienced, and I'm not exactly sure why, and I don't know if I have enough time to look into it. I'm sure that Sudbury, Northborough, and Hopkinton probably have a deviation from that. Holliston spends a lot more money than we do too, but they get results. Their MCAS scores are significantly higher than ours. They're not even on the same charts.
So to Kevin's point though, you can't, they have much different demographics, and so we have the data you're looking for, and we share it.
I have it too. I pulled it up. It's readily available. It's just,
Yeah, I got it.
unfortunately, it's overwhelming.
So
It's
is there
351
one-
towns of, it's just, and
Can you come up? Because it's got to be on
Okay,
microphone.
They won't hear you, Joe.
Yeah.
They won't hear
So there's a report called the Radar Report that
Yeah.
has that data that you're talking about, and
I pulled one of them down. I just.
On the DOE side?
it's on, it's on the DOE site, and I can email it to you guys. It's the same report we shared with you guys last year, and I'll email it to you guys again this year. But you can sort by what the state defines as comparable districts. And so the districts that the state defines as comparable districts are districts like Attleboro, Barnstable, Marlboro, Medford, Methuen, Quincy, Stoughton, because they're looking at the underlying demographics. And to Kevin's point, it's much more expensive to educate our students than some of the students in Holliston, Hopedale, and Hopkinton that don't have the diversity that we have. So if we use Marlboro as an example, since they're on the 495 corridor, Marlboro's per pupil spending is $16,234, which is $2,000 per pupil more than what
What about
Milford's
Hudson?
spending.
Hudson is actually lower than that.
But Hudson's not a comparable district. Hudson has very different demographics, so that's why Hudson isn't included
I'll
here.
challenge that one, because I've been there.
Well, I think we can do for this conversation is if you can email that, Jerry, and I think that, and then you can look over with that, and then we can continue the conversation about once you've seen the report, because I think it's unfair when you're looking at the screen and you're talking about your report. I think we all need to be looking at the same thing and then to have a real
When you
conversation.
take the 351 towns, you've got to take Boston, Cambridge, and that whole corridor out of this equation, because they're, data-wise, they're not statistically comparable, because the way they do things and everything is, and those numbers are,
So when you say the way they do things, what do you mean?
well, they're much more
But Jerry, I
expensive.
think you make a good point, but I think Joe is trying to get us in comparison that's comparable.
Yeah.
So let's just wait for the data
So
and
if
see
you
what
could,
that looks like.
if you can do that, Joe, that'd be great, and then we can,
I
perfect.
don't disagree with you, but I don't think the demographics change from here to Bellingham to Blackstone, from here.
50% of our students have problems. That's half our population for students. They can't read, write, do anything. It's 50%. I guarantee you some other schools in that district don't have that problem.
So what Joe's referring to is, this year, actually, as a district, we've gone over the 50% threshold for what's considered high-need students. And a high-need student is a student that receives special education services, which we just kind of talked about. A student who's an English learner, or a student who is economically disadvantaged, or a student that falls into multiple categories. Like we have some students that fall into all three categories. They're a student with special needs that receives English Learner Services that's also economically disadvantaged. There's really not a cost necessarily associated with economically disadvantaged students per se in terms of like how we approach educating them, but for EL students and for special education students, there is an additional cost to provide services. Our special ed numbers are actually below the state average. They tend to hover a little below 15%. So it's about, I think last year was like 14.7%, give or take. Our EL numbers have been growing as we've been talking to this committee dramatically. And in the last 10 years, the percentage of students in the Milford Public Schools who come from families who speak a language other than English in the home has doubled from 17% to 34%. Right now, we have 1,000 students who are either directly in the ELL program or receive what's called monitoring services once they've exited the program, which is required by the state to make sure that they're continuing to, progress, basically. A typical student in the EL program is in the program for somewhere between 4 and 5 years if they kind of follow the path we're looking for. So if we get a student in kindergarten, they tend to exit the program in, 4th or 5th grade. And that's why you'll see a dip in the EL numbers when we get to kind of, 5th grade at Woodland in the middle school. But we have students coming to us at every single grade, and they come to us at every single level of language proficiency, from 0 to 5. And that requires like a significant amount of investment. And, I want to thank the committee and the community because they continue to provide that investment to support these students, which I think is fantastic. But I think what the committee has to realize is that if you're coming over from a different country, in the majority of our students speak either Spanish or Portuguese, but we have more than 20 languages spoken in the Milford Public Schools. If you're taking a test, in the first year they take the MCAS, their scores don't count. But every year after that, their scores do count. And when you take a student who is still struggling to learn the language, it's going to impact their ability to take a test in a language that they're not fluent in. And I think that's the point that I think both Joe Gallery and Joe Marias were trying to make is, it's a different circumstance than some of the other communities you were referencing.
So how do we ascertain, how do we eliminate this thing that keeps entering into our numbers? I have an answer, and that it's not going to be politically correct, but why aren't we segregating those people out of the MCAS scores to see what we are doing with people that don't require special needs?
So that information's available on the website as well, because they do.
But we always come back to the same issue, that we have special needs that's keeping us from getting to a certain level of performance. But we don't have to report those out. We can segregate the population, the cohort.
So
Okay.
the way the MCAS is reported is the general MCAS scores that go into like the Boston Globe, for example, are your whole group. They don't generally break it down by subgroup. We as a district, and each school does analysis by subgroups. But
It's on the state website.
it is on the state website, but the number that's presented is the overall aggregate number. It's not the disaggregated number that you're referring to.
And so when you break those categories out, how are we doing?
Yeah, I think generally pretty well. But the other thing that I want to say, because if you look at the percentage of kids going to college, we have a higher percentage of kids going to four-year colleges than the rest of the state. It's not a big gap between us and the rest of the state for four-year schools. We're up a couple percentage points, but we do have a slight edge there. If you're talking and those are aggregate numbers as well. If you're talking about where do our kids go to school? Our kids get into some of the most competitive colleges and universities in the country. So there's a clear quality of education happening there because kids are able to kind of follow that pathway and find success. And we've had kids, go to 30 or 40 of the top colleges and universities and get accepted to probably double or triple that number in the last several years. So I think when you look at MCAS, I think it's just. It's a public measure, but it's just one measure of kind of school quality. And I think even the state is starting to recognize the direction they're going in is to kind of try to take that comparison off the table. That's one of the reasons they moved away from the level system, because I think people, anytime, we did standards-based grading at the elementary schools, and you know, I think it's reversed, like 4, 3, 2, 1, you know, 4, you kind of exceeded the standard. And I think parents would equate like a 4 to an A, a 3 to a B, a 2 to a C, and a 1 to a D, which really is not the way to look at it. And I think the public in general, and this is not an indictment of anybody here, would do the same thing with like level 1, 2, 3, you know, and 4 schools. It's really, I think, a very narrow measure of, you know, what we do as a school, because we're really looking at English and math. And the vast number of, you know, students in positions, you know, the math we do in high school is well beyond any math most people use on a daily basis. And I might be talking to a group of engineers and accountants who are using some of those formulas, but it doesn't take into account the incredible music programs we have. It doesn't take into account, you know, some of the science that's going on and some of the, you know, engaging programs we've added recently. It doesn't take into account kind of the well-rounded experience we offer students at Milford High School, where they can take video production. We just started we have 2 career programs, which is, you know, hospitality and tourism management, business and banking. We just started a building trades course for students who aren't headed to college. And we just had a meeting today with the Building Trades Association and a representative from the state who is applauding us for the work that we're doing, because we're providing a pathway to careers that lead to, you know, kids who aren't going to college to a more lucrative career. So we're focused on the kids who are looking at, you know, our tier 1 most competitive colleges and universities, but we're also looking at the population to make sure they're successful, the students that maybe aren't going to college or are spending a year in college and not finding success. So I think when you talk about MCAS, although it's the public measure that we see, it's not necessarily, I think, indicative of school quality, nor does it give you a good picture of what's happening in the Milford Public Schools broadly. There's one more point. Go ahead, jump in.
Has the town been funding all of the increases needed to address the ELL type situations, or are those resources that are being taken from other sectors?
So they've been in addition to resources that we've asked for and received the last several years, at least since I've been superintendent. So they're not necessarily pulling resources from like your general education student. They're in addition to resources. It's like I said, it's very similar to special education. When someone comes in at like a 0 level, which means they have no English language proficiency, those students are pulled out into kind of English language development kind of focused courses to kind of accelerate their ability to gain fluency in the language so they can access the curriculum.
Jeff?
So, thank you. You mentioned, and then this is a segue for you, because I know you have it, but I don't see it in the packet. You mentioned that we're above the state average in the students that we send to college. And I know we asked a question about how many graduate. And I know you have that, I know you talked to us that you have that data.
Yep.
I just didn't see it in the packet, so it's
No, and we're actually doing a presentation to the citizens for Milford next January 15th.
Monday.
Is it Monday?
Monday,
Tuesday.
That's what's in the pack, anyway.
I think is it Monday or Tuesday? Tuesday's the 15th, right?
15.
Yeah, so Tuesday's the 15th. And in that session, Josh Otland, who's the high school principal, will have that data available. I can actually send you, anybody who's interested in like getting that presentation too, I can send that I'm happy to send that information. What we have now, and that Jeff is referencing it's actually the second year we have the data, because I think it started with in either the 2011 or 2012 cohort, is kind of like college completion rates. And we're actually starting to track that and connecting it back to high schools. And we'll be able to, and I don't want to quote incorrect information tonight and give you like a wrong percentage. And you know somebody thinking I'm being dishonest or deceitful. I just don't have the data in front of me.
Yeah, good point though, Jeff, and we'll get that from you, like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
We're
and
gonna have it done by the 15th anyway.
Yeah, so we'll be presenting it on the 15th. So anybody who wants it
Wednesday,
can.
right? 16th?
Is it the 16th?
Wednesday, yeah.
All right.
Wednesday.
So it's the,
So everybody will.
Wednesday night.
so if you show up on any other night, just take a book out from the library.
Sounds good.
It's in the library, right?
Yeah, it is at the library. That I'm 100% sure of.
Allegedly. All right. We got sidetracked.
did.
We're fine.
No, I'm just talking about, we're trying to remember to remind Kevin where we left off.
School choice?
School choice.
So I can jump into school choice if there isn't any more budget questions with the data we just provided. So I give you two packets of information, and I don't want to spend a ton of time with it, because I think we've talked this one to death to some degree. But the one packet I have for you, which is this one right here, And this is data we provided the committee before. I think it's updated through 18-19. And basically what this has is the grades where students are in terms of leaving and coming in, and how it's broken down by town. So what towns are sending kids to the Milford Public Schools, and where are kids from the Milford Public Schools going? Okay? And this is just an update to information we provided previously.
It all makes sense. The only question I had was 11th grade. Why?
Which,
19 in?
Yeah, so I would say that's the number that's in that grade that year. So it's not actually when they exited the program. So,
I thought this was entering. I thought it,
yeah, no, it is entering this, but the breakdown is really more.
In that grade.
So in that grade, that's the number of school choice students we have.
oh,
currently.
I'm so sorry.
I may have misspoke
No, no,
too.
no. The way I was reading it, I apologize. It looked like 4 came in for the kindergarten
No,
program. We have
yeah.
4 in the kindergarten program.
Four in the kindergarten in 2013.
Okay, all right.
And you
all
can
right.
kind of follow the
No, no,
numbers
no.
across, and it kind of goes
Now
through.
it makes
Yeah.
total sense to me.
Yeah, so
I read the graph the wrong way.
No, and we typically, like, at the junior and senior year, we typically don't have many kids at all choicing in.
That's why I saw the number and I
choicing
was
out.
like, okay.
It's kind of rare.
The last page is this year.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
And you can kind of follow the numbers through.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman? Yeah, Kevin, yeah, Jerry?
No, Phil.
Yeah. You know, I realize school choice is a long process.
Yep.
And certainly, when someone's choiced out in the 7th and 8th grade, they're not coming back, okay? So the focus is really the elementary grades, okay? So I would be curious, in terms of students leaving, how are we doing in the elementary grades? And I'd almost, and I tried to do it just by observation, but if someone could put that together, you know, kindergarten from, 13 to 18, 19, first grade, second grade, because that's really kind of a barometer of how we're gonna do down the road, so.
Yep. So, yeah.
Are we making
can do
progress
that.
there? I guess is the second part of that.
Yeah, no, I think we have that, just not in this packet, because it makes it even more, convoluted than it.
Because that's the only way we're gonna gain.
Yeah, and we're really marketing to the customers that we have. We have some kids that will choice in and out, but that's a very small percentage.
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, some kids have come back, some kids,
Looks like it's a lot of activity with Hopedale.
I think you're gonna see higher numbers in the towns that are contiguous to us, particularly Hopedale, because the parents have to provide transportation in a school choice situation. So you're generally not gonna see a family take a kid to Cambridge or Boston unless they're an employee of that town. So sometimes you see like a one-off, and a lot of times, like, that's a teacher who works in that community.
This is the best year in the last 6 for spread.
Yeah, so we're actually, the trends right now are, the school choice out has leveled off and is starting to decline. The school choice in, we're actually not able to meet the demand, because we obviously want to make sure class sizes for our Milford students, don't exceed particular numbers at particular levels.
School choice out is not declined,
It is,
not according to the sheriff.
not according to,
The lowest it's been since 2015, 2014.
It's actually on an increase.
that's,
If you look at the hard numbers, and that's the dollars and cents.
Oh, that's the cost per pupil, well, they're gonna go up, but the number of students
the
is
number's
at
gone.
179 now. And as
And you gotta remember that
Mike
number
says,
that
it's the
you're-
lowest it's been in,
5 or 6.
the number that you're referencing I believe brings in a couple other
2014.
groups, which is charter schools and the online charter schools, which aren't necessarily school choice.
School choice sending is 1,323,000. Charter school sending is 336, for a grand total 1,659,000. And I guess that is disconcerting in itself to begin with, because that's a direct hit to our cherry sheet. The other thing that concerns me is I'm hearing rumors, and please dispel these rumors, that that's gonna go up by another 300 to 350,000 in the next cycle. If that's true or not. That's what I'm hearing, and I think.
I'm not sure where you're hearing that from.
Kathy Perry, on 2 separate occasions.
She talking about out of district or at school choice? Because she wouldn't know the school choice now. I think she's referring to out of
I
district.
was anticipating that she would be here tonight, so she could
and
clarify and explain that.
to be honest with you, that's the 300,000 we just talked about earlier.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that's,
It keeps popping up 300,000.
So that's
additional.
the out of district, because that is the 300,000 we were talking about, that you're gonna be short.
Right. Which is
I'm
different.
sure that's what she was talking about.
She said more. She said that she's expected an increase in our
Well-
teacher.
I believe for next year.
I would
Next
prefer not
year.
to talk about something that Kathy Perry said without Kathy Perry being here.
That's fine.
If
Yeah,
that's
that's-
okay.
That seems reasonable.
We need clarification, are we gonna go the wrong, we need clarification on that, we just can't sit
Yeah.
here and add another
Yep.
$300,000.
Well, once again, Jerry, I want Kathy to be involved in the conversation, because if she was talking about out of district, as Joe infers, it, actually, we talked about that earlier, that's the 300,000. And once again, I just don't want to talk about something she's not here, so. But it's not a bad point, Jerry, but I'm not gonna have the
It's a huge
conversation.
number. It needs to-
Go ahead.
Okay, I guess, you know I like simple, easy to understand. Jerry's saying our numbers are going up this year. I'm seeing 176 this year, 187 last year. Simple Portuguese math says 176 is less than 187. So is this number accurate?
So for 2019, it's accurate as of, I believe, November.
What?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
so 176 is still less than 187.
Correct.
So the numbers are going down.
Correct.
Okay.
You need to look at the trend of the cherry sheets right here.
But that's dollars, Jerry. It always costs more money to educate every single year, whether it's the Parks Department, the Highway Department, every year it costs more than it did the year before. So yes, on the cherry sheet, it's gonna cost more. The cherry sheet every year is going to go up because the cost of everything is constantly going up. But the number of students net, as Al just pointed out, is now 11 kids less than last year.
And that's the direction we want to go in. And again, this is a slow process. Because once a kid goes, like I said to Phil, we tend not to get them back. And once a kid comes into Milford schools, they tend not to leave because, parents want consistency in terms of education, and kids build friendships and they become connected to the
There's
school
no
community.
question. It's not like you're gonna switch which supermarket you go to. It's like,
Yeah,
that's
it's
something that's easy. Changing a kid in the school system, you don't jump around for better deals, on a constant basis. Jeff?
So, I actually agree with Jerry and Al both, but to both their points, the net is going down, but our cost is going up. But, and to your point, it costs more money to send them out, but our receipts should be going up as well, one for one, because the net is going, it's costing us way more money on the cherry sheet, even though the net is going down. That's the problem that we have, and it's just not going fast enough, I guess. I don't know what we do to fix that, and I heard Phil say it's not immediate, we know that. But I think what we've been looking for is what is gonna curb that? What is gonna curb it? Not 6, 7 kids a year, what's gonna curb that?
On that same topic, we didn't get this on Monday, but this almost suggests that our school choice is now.
Yeah, so let me explain what I did here. And there's basically 3 or 4 ways to look at school choice from a fiscal analysis. There's in the 18 and 19 numbers are kind of projected because we haven't received the official numbers from the state yet. But it's really more, I really want you to look at it more from an academic exercise than to kind of say, well, this is off $5,000 or $10,000. I really want you to look at kind of the analysis more than anything else. So the first one is the way Jerry just brought it up. 18 and 19, we had 187 students out. At $5,000, it's $935,000. In 2019, that number went down to 176, which is $880,000 in the negative. If you look at the differential between school choice out and school choice in, which I think we need to look at it more broadly as a community and not kind of where the money goes necessarily. You have, with those same numbers, you have 370,000 deficit in 2018. You have a 265,000 deficit in 2019. If you look at kind of an actual revenue analysis, and I think the important thing to remember is that this is true of any community, not just Milford, is that the town receives that Chapter 70 money on a per pupil basis for every student that attends a public school in the community. So if there's a student that attends a private school, that kid's kind of off the table for the state providing resources. But if a kid, and again, not to confuse matters worse, but if we send a kid to a special education private school, that's a different matter. That student is still considered a public school student, we'd still receive that Chapter 70 money for that student. But basically what happens is, for every student, let's just look at 2019, because our, go to the next page.
I have one question, where'd you come up with a 5,000 cost per student?
That's the flat number. That's the flat number. So you get more money, and this is why I wanted to do it from a simple perspective. So you get more money as either a receiving town or a sending town if a student has special needs, because the state recognizes that it costs more to provide services to a student with special needs. You get more money if a student is an EL student, for example. So if
Base
you,
number is 5,000.
but the base number, and I just want to keep it simple, just as an like I said, it's an exercise. You just kind of can understand the flow of it.
Yeah, but our assessment, to Jerry's point, our assessment for 18 was 1.3. That's still 67, almost 68 a student.
Yep.
Combination is 1.6, including.
The other numbers, yeah,
So that's a big difference.
No, it is, but I just want, like I said, just follow me through from just
Go ahead.
because I want to keep it simple, because otherwise it gets,
I just get confused and I get concerned when I see that it's a glowing thing that we're in so much better.
no,
When
no,
I don't-
no,
I
no,
don't
I'm
feel
not
that
saying,
way.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all, but I just want to make sure the point is made that we're receiving, let's go to 2019, because that's the year we're currently in. We're receiving 11,500 per student from the state, basically, through Chapter 70. That's like our base number. And if you take that minus 5,000, there's a net of 6,500. And we're getting a net of $6,500 per student that we're actually not educating. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah. Kevin, I have a question.
Sure.
If that same student is out of district, doesn't that impact the analysis? Because you got expenses, you have someone choicing in.
Yep.
And so you have revenue.
Yep.
And you're getting Chapter 70 money.
Yep.
But don't you have expenses associated with that student that could be out of the norm, could be out of district, which would distort that analysis?
So if there's an say if there's an out-of-district kid that's placed, like say a kid from Uxbridge, or let's go Hopedale, because I think the biggest in and out is from Hopedale. So a kid from Hopedale comes to the Milford Public Schools, and it's determined through the IEP process that they have to go out of district. Hopedale becomes responsible for those costs.
In every out-of-district situation, that's the hometown?
Home district.
Home
So
district?
similarly, like a Milford kid who goes to, let's say Hopedale again, who's placed out of district from Hopedale, we would be responsible for those costs.
Okay, all right, that helps.
Mike?
Okay. I'm
You
sorry.
started to touch on limits on choice in earlier, class size issues.
Yeah.
And I know there are some rules on that. Are you actually facing limits on choice in? functionally?
We are. One great example is in 7th and 8th grade. We have kind of bubble classes. They're just a lot larger than our typical classes. So we knew going into the, even like the summer, before the summer started, that we were not going to accept any school choice students in grades 7 or 8. We also typically don't accept any seniors either. Just because generally, it's just generally not like just good practice.
Cost benefit issue there?
Well, sometimes like kids can't graduate because our requirements might be, from a high school perspective, a little different than like another high school. We may have a particular requirement. So there's a lot of kind of complications that come with somebody coming in their senior year. We don't take a lot of juniors either.
I know I'm oversimplifying, but are you turning away a lot?
I would say, I think it depends on what you would consider a lot, but I would say we've probably turned away significantly more than a person. I don't have that number in front of me, but if I were to give you a range or estimate, I would say it's somewhere between 15 and 25 kids that we've had to say no to, either because they were 7th or 8th graders when they were looking to transition in, and we just can't bring more kids into those grades, or maybe we had 5 slots available in 1st grade, and we had to say no to the 6th kid who came in. It's those kind of situations.
When a student goes out of district, do they have to stay within the state, or could they go to, say, Rhode Island?
So for school choice,
Yes.
it has to be within Massachusetts.
They
So-
can't go like to Woonsocket or?
No. So we can't accept, like, if a family
Somebody
from,
coming in.
if a family from Woonsocket wanted to school choice into Milford, we could not accept them.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking special education, there are a couple of students that are educated out of state, but their needs are probably so extraordinary that there's not a program in Massachusetts to meet their needs. And they're generally in New England. Sometimes we place a kid in Connecticut on occasion, or Rhode Island, or sometimes New Hampshire. but they generally are in Massachusetts. So just kind of on both sides of it.
I think,
Just one second, let Jeff go.
I think I want to be careful saying that we're getting the Chapter 70 money for these kids, we're really not educating, we didn't reduce any staff, so it's not like, you still have the expense, I don't want to go down,
That's-
oh,
yeah.
we're getting money for not educating, nothing
No,
went down for us.
Yeah.
And but that's also precisely why we limit at a particular grade level, because, again, getting that $5,000 back, like, say we're, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at, so 2019, we basically have 176 out, right, and this was these numbers fluctuate all the time. But with 176 in 2019, 119 in. So we basically gained the 5,000 back we lost for about 119 out of, so there's a gap of, I didn't do it in this one, it's 67, is that right? So there's a gap of 67 where there's the $5,000. Where, and this goes back to your question, Mike, too, is part of the reason why we don't, like, keep adding kids in is because we don't want to have, like, a staff impact. So, like, we're never gonna, like, at a third grade level, if we have, like, say, 22 kids in a class, or 23, or 21, whatever that number is, we're not gonna grab, like, another 20 school choice students, because the actual cost of educating a child is about, was it 14? Joe, do you have that number right at your fingertips? 14?
14.3 something.
Yeah, give or take. So it's a tricky game to play from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, even this analysis, I think, is tricky, because, I mean, the reason we get more chapter 70 money is because we have ELL and
Correct.
special needs, so
Correct.
we have higher expenses.
Correct.
So it's not like falling to the bottom line, so to speak.
No, and I'm not saying that. And I'd say
Yeah.
we're still
No,
gonna,
I just-
with our budget requests, we're still gonna be asking for, more than a level funded budget,
Yeah, no, but I just
a level
wanted to-
service budget.
I'm not clear on this chapter 70 differential. Are you saying that we're getting the chapter 70 money for the kids that live in Milford and go to another town?
Yeah, so basically what happens is, let's say, pretend you're a third grader, Andy, and your parents make the choice to move you to Hopedale. So we would get 11,000, that's on the next
So
page.
whether he decides to stay in district or go to
Yeah.
another town.
Yeah, so-
We still get that 11.
Yeah, so we get 11.5 whether you're here or not. The difference is we pay the 5,000, and let's just say you're a general ed student, just to keep it simple. We pay the $5,000 out to Hopedale, and we still have that 6,500 that we keep as a community, although we're not educating it. And the state does that for a couple reasons. One reason is they don't want districts kind of, and I think the communities encourage this, to kind of become hyper-competitive and fight each other for students and really battle. And in this area, it's not bad, but if you go out to Western Mass or down at the Cape, it's kind of cutthroat for, like, school choice is it's a blood sport down there.
So it's theoretically a disincentive for the town to be taking in kids from other towns.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite. It's actually an incentive to have your kids go to another town.
Yeah, it's a
your kids go to-
disincentive for the town that's educated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, I think as a community, we want to, we want everybody to be making, obviously, the choice that, the Milford Public Schools are the district for them. But, that's just kind of just broadly kind of how it works from just a functional perspective.
Anybody else on school choice? It's obviously something we're gonna come back to.
Yeah,
over and
yeah,
over again. And this is all this was, is just
This
like
is
an
the first
update.
time we've ever talked about it.
That's
so this
exactly
is-
my point, so, and we're gonna continue to have these.
Yeah.
And I have the questions about all the stuff, I think also having Kathy here, I think is a crucial point, I think that
Yeah. when
having
it-
her at this meeting would have been beneficial, so.
And she wasn't available, and I didn't want to,
And we certainly got enough information to absorb now, but, going forward, I wanna make sure that she's at the next meeting. 'cause-
When you get to fund lines, that's where my expertise starts to
No,
kind of
there's
drift
no
away.
question.
Yeah.
No, that was good.
The comment
Thank you.
was made, this is not the first time we've talked about this.
No, I was
No,
kidding, Jerry, I was kidding.
He
We've-
was,
just gonna get
he was making a joke, because it's about the 90th time it came up.
We've talked about this at times.
Because some time ago.
I didn't know that, really?
10 or 12 years ago, there was
Oh,
no differential there. We were at net zero. In
Yeah.
fact, we spent several years over the course of my tenure on this committee where we had a positive couple $100,000 favorable to the town. All of a sudden, we haven't been able to get a handle on this. And I guess my question to your committee spoofing in the administration is what are we gonna do to fix it? Because it has to get fixed. We've lost close to $10 million in school choice money. I could have renovated the entire high school with that money.
Not with $10 million. That won't even get you a roof, baby.
I could have got a good start, I'll tell you that.
All right, all right.
Maybe
We're not
down
gonna,
right now I don't
okay,
have
we're
to.
not gonna go down this road, okay. But that's what, we were joking about the school choice. I got the joke, but I guess it wasn't funny.
All right, well, thank you for having us today. We
No,
appreciate
but thank you, and once again, this is just a, other request for this committee, that we're gonna have you in as a full committee, so that we're not doing it, like I said, April 15th, where all 15 of us are seeing this budget for the first time, and only the 5 or 6 subcommittee members are privy to all the information, so we're gonna try to.
We'll be sharing that preliminary numbers with the subcommittee on the, I think it's the 15th.
Yeah, the 15th. I'm not trusting your dates, so.
Yeah, I don't either at this point. Meg Hornberg corrected me like 17
I trust
times,
Joycey, though, so if Joycey says it's the 15th, I believe her. Jeff?
Kevin, I don't know if it was you or Craig, someone said last night, you started talking about junior, senior high school. What's the vision for that? I heard it come out of one of your mouths.
I had mentioned that when we were talking, after the forum that we had, we talked about, when we're thinking of a long-range plan, you have to take into consideration, 10 years down the road, if we start reconfiguring schools, that could be an option. And then we said that we were going to do that. That's what Nesty looks at.
So you're like 10 years.
Somewhere down that road.
Yeah, I really don't
That's
wanna have
a
that
big,
conversation.
that's a big can of worms.
It came
No,
out, so
Jeff,
it's like-
Jeff, I know exactly what you are, but we need to get people home by 11 o'clock tonight. If we had that discussion, I think we'd be here for a while.
Absolutely. Thank you.
But thank you guys very much. I appreciate
Thank
you
you for your
coming in.
time.
You're gonna be back here, like I said, because it's important that we keep the full committee abreast of everything. And just keep up the good work and keep trucking with the subcommittee and that kind of stuff, so.
Yep.
I'm sorry, my boss is over
Mr.
there.
Chairman, if I could, I would recommend to all of you to reach out to the superintendent. And, it's all well and good to talk about statistics and talk about money, but nobody talks about the good things that go on in the Milford Public Schools every day. I served on that committee for 9 years, 2 years as chairman. Yeah, there's some tough things, but there's a lot of great things that go on in our school district. And I hear all the time in this community where it's not the same, it's not this, it's not what it was 30 years ago. No, it's not what it was 30 years ago. It's not. But we all need to work together to continue to try and improve the educational process in this community. And what this committee and what this administration and what these teachers deal with on a daily basis. Many people have heard me say it many, many times as a school committee member. We used to talk about MCAS over and over again. And I used to say, and I'll go public again with it, I really don't care about MCAS. I care about the children, the child that comes to school every day from a broken home, that's had no lunch, no breakfast, doesn't want to be in school. And these administrators and these teachers take them into the building and give them a safe haven to be in. And try to give them an education. Try to give them an education. And give them the understanding that it's going to be okay. So I'm not saying that MCAS isn't important, but what I'm saying is that, and I encourage all of you, just to take a day, take a tour. If you take all year and you do all 7 schools and you do 1 school at a time, just take the time to go into the Milford Public Schools and see the phenomenal job that not only does the school committee do, does the administration do, but the most important people, are the people that are in the classroom every single day dealing with these children. The one point that was lost tonight is, when you talk about MCAS, and I'm sorry I'm kind of going on, when you bring a child into the 2nd grade from a different country, and I've experienced it in my 9 years, when you bring a child into the junior year of high school from a different country, 2 different students, and the state tells us we have to get them ready to pass the MCAS. 2 totally different scenarios. So imagine being an educator at the high school level versus an educator at the elementary level. And I just want to back up for a second, and I just want to make one point very, very clear. It's not the same community it was 30 years ago. But to all of us, all of you sitting there tonight, do the best job you can, absolutely. Because things change. Things change. But we all gotta work together. We all gotta work together. We can't criticize one another. We all gotta work together to continue to move this community forward. And I sincerely mean that, and I thank all of you who sit there tonight. I truly do, I truly do. But it's not all about stats. It's not all about stats. And so I encourage all of you, at some point, please, reach out to the superintendent, reach out to the assistant superintendent, take a tour. Take a tour. Some of you have children in the district, so you already know. But take the time to take a tour and look at the good things that go on in this district. The good things. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And actually, to be honest with you, I have not had a chance to forward the email, but Kevin sent me an email today at 12 o'clock inviting all of you to exactly that, to take a tour anytime you wanted to of any of the school buildings. So I just haven't had a chance to forward it. I think it went to a couple of us, but I didn't get a chance to send it to the entire committee. So good point, Mike. And actually,
And I forgot to say that too.
Kevin already did
I
that.
forgot to leave it, so thanks, Mike.
Thanks for pointing that out. All right, so obviously, we're not going to be strangers. We're going to see a lot of each other over the next 3 or 4 months. Anybody else have any questions for the schools? Motion to adjourn by Jeff, second by Chuck. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thanks for your time.